Hey everyone, welcome to Mindful Math. I'm Tim, and today we're going to talk about exponent rules and how to simplify expressions with lots of variables and lots of exponents. So I actually think the best way to learn all these exponent rules, because there's so many of them, is to not specifically try to memorize the rules, but instead think about why these rules might be true, and they'll become much more intuitive so that you won't actually be able to spout out the rule if someone asks it to you, but you'll be able to reduce these expressions. So when I was student teaching, my fourth lesson that I had to teach was on simplifying exponents or variables with lots of exponents in them. And I actually thought that this would be relatively easy for the students. I had great students, they were honors algebra 2, and the first 3 lessons I taught I actually thought were difficult, and they got them really easily. So I thought, all right, great, this is going to be a breeze, because to me, simplifying these expressions was really easy. But that's because I had done it so much, and I didn't know the rules so much as I understood the logic behind the rules. But of course, these students hadn't been exposed to these types of things as much, and so they were trying to memorize the rules because that's how I taught it. So I don't think that's the best way to learn it. I think that if you try to memorize all the rules, as I had my students do, say, when you're multiplying exponents together, you add the exponents. When the exponent's outside, you multiply. When you're dividing, you subtract. There's too many rules to remember, and they're so similar that you're going to have trouble keeping them straight in your head. So instead, I think it's better to understand why they're true, and that way you won't even have to think about the rule. You'll just do it naturally. So let's go ahead and do a problem together, and you can follow along and think about why I'm doing the things I'm doing and how it might work. So we do have an exponent outside of these parentheses, and the really nice thing about a lot of these exponent expressions is very rarely will our teachers give us ones with addition or subtraction symbols. So when there's addition and subtraction, we have to be really, really careful about order of operations. We still need to be careful and mindful of order of operations, but when everything's being multiplied or divided, we can choose a little bit more when we do things. So we could get rid of that 4 outside right away and put it inside. So if we did that, we'd have to raise every term in here to the 4th power. But we can also simplify inside the parentheses first, and that's going to save us a little bit of time so we don't have to raise 20 to the 4th power and 5 to the 4th power and figure out what those are. So let's go ahead and start with the simplest thing to simplify, which is, of course, the numbers. So 5 divided by 20 is, of course, just 1/4. So we can get rid of that right away, and we have 1/4 x cubed y, and on the bottom we'll have, we'll just have 4, not 20, 20 x y to the 5th, and we have to keep raising everything to the 4th power. And of course, you don't even have to write 1/4. You can get rid of that 1 because that's just a coefficient in front of the x cubed. And of course, 1 times x cubed is just x cubed. All right, so the next thing that we can simplify are these x's. We could also do the y's, no reason to pick one over the other, but let's go ahead and do the x's. And remember that x cubed is just x times x times x. X, don't get any funny ideas, kids. All right, so x cubed just means that there's 3 x's that are being multiplied together. So if we have 3 on top and 1 on the bottom, still don't get any ideas, we can just cross off the extra ones. So if we simplify that, we'll have x squared y over 4y to the 5th. And we'll raise that whole thing still to the 4th power. We still have y terms in common, so we can do the same thing with that. And if we simplify that, we'll be left with x squared. The y on the top will get eliminated, and we'll have 4y to the 4th on the bottom, and the whole thing will be raised to the 4th power. Now we can go ahead and simplify that 4th power, and it's going to be easier than if we had done it at the beginning because we have so many less terms. So what is x squared raised to the 4th power? Well, remember that x squared is 2 x's being multiplied together. So if we're raising that to the 4th power, that means we're going to have 2 x's 4 times. So that's going to give us xx, 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 xx. So that means we have 8 x's in total, which is the same as x to the 8th power. So if we do that, we get x to the 8th, and we can do the same thing down here. We'll have 4 to the 4th, and y will be to the 16th, because we have y to the 4th, which is 4 y's being multiplied together 4 times. So we have 4 groups of 4, which gives us 16. So that exponent rule of raising an exponent to the exponent is we multiply. So if you memorize that rule, that's great. But if you kind of logic through it, I think it'll be a little bit easier to remember. So the reason why we multiply there is because we have y to the 4th, which is 4 y's being multiplied together, and we have that to the 4th power. So that means we have 4 groups of 4, and of course that reminds us a lot of multiplication. So the only thing left that we have to simplify is that 4 to the 4th. If you can't do that in your head, no problem. It is 256, so our final answer will be x to the 8th over 256 times y to the 16th. And of course, when I was in school, they would tell us, well, you have to learn how to do mental math, what is there another kind? Physical math, right? But you had to learn how to do these things in your head, how to multiply numbers in your head, because you're not always going to have a calculator with you, kids. Of course, you can tell your teachers, yeah, I will. I'll always have a calculator in my pocket. So 4 to the 4th is 256. I personally don't care if you can multiply 4 to the 4th. I'd rather you learn this mindfully. Hopefully your teachers agree with that mindset. So this is our final answer. If you have any questions about exponent rules, I know that negative exponents tend to give us a little bit more problems than these positive exponents. So just remember that negative exponents, whenever you have a numerator or denominator, you can just flip the negative exponents and make them positive. So if you have an x to the negative 3 in the numerator, just make it an x to the positive 3 in the denominator, and vice versa. If you have a y to the negative 5th in the denominator, you can make it y to the 5th in the numerator. So a negative exponent is just saying 1 over whatever that is in the positive. So x to the negative 3 is the same as 1 over x to the 3rd power. So let me know what questions you have. If you're having trouble memorizing any of these rules and you feel like you really need to memorize them, try to give it a different name, a name that evokes something more in you. Rather than just the multiply rule, the raise to the power rule, something like that, name it something different. Even something silly like the outside exponent rule, or something that just reminds you a little bit more. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time.